Join us in welcoming our special guest, Kurt Luidhardt. Kurt and his wife, Kristen, co-founded the Prosper Group in 2006. The agency has grown from a small digital team working out of Starbucks back when Republicans were still learning how to use the internet to industry leader of Variety Center Digital that we know today. With a specialization in digital advocacy and advertising, as well as small dollar fundraising. Kurt, thanks for joining us today.
I'm excited to have Kurt on the show today too. Kurt's a longtime friend and our boss here at the Prosper Group.
Well, it's good to be here.
Quick question for you. Have you picked up any new hobbies during the quarantine?
Well, I think I probably lost hobbies more than gained. And the reason is, Chris and I had, maybe 3 months into the pandemic, had our first baby Eliana. And so I don't want to call her a hobby. We've gained a hobby. We've got a baby now. She keeps us busy. But I don't feel like I have time to read as much as I used to, which was formerly probably a top time consuming thing for me. So I guess maybe I've lost a hobby, but I've gained a baby. So it worked out well.
One of the things that's always stood out to me about the Prosper Group is our culture and our core values, being mountain climbers, striving for excellence, leaving our egos at the door. How has PG's culture impacted our company with everything that's gone on in the past year?
Well, I think perhaps our culture of being mountain climbers, overcoming obstacles, really helped us roll smoothly in. I mean, perhaps not every employee would call it smoothly. We've had all sorts of changes in the way we work in the last year, but I felt real proud of how everybody adjusted well. On one hand, I feel like I can say we didn't skip a beat, even though we went fully remote. And of course, some of us have really loved it. I love it some. I get more time with Ellie, but there are days when I'd love to work in a quieter office. But I think the staff did well. I was really proud of that. And we found unique ways to stay in touch with each other, doing happy hours on Zoom. That's been great. And we're hoping to grow our use of that here in the next few months, while we still have so much of our people remote.
The Prosper Group was founded in 2006. Can you believe we'll be celebrating 15 years of the Prosper Group later this year?
Yeah, all of this makes me feel old, Dan. Yeah, I remember the first, working out of a coffee shop, working out of our loft. Our first employee actually worked out of our loft in our house. And we would go around talking how we were going to get our team on something. And our team was just Kristen and I. And to fast forward to 15 years later, and we've got 40 staff and an office, which of course we're not using at the moment, but it does make me feel old. I don't believe it, but I guess 15 years goes by fast. So the next 15 will go by just as fast.
So Kurt, we talk a lot about fundraising, and I know you have a new post coming out here soon about the importance of your house file. Can you explain to listeners just the importance of a house file and what it is?
So when we talk about house files with our clients, we mean all of the unique digital information they have on supporters. So it often starts with friends and family and their email addresses and expands to local Republican Party activists and then others who sign up over time. And that's their own file that our client would have the ability to use. And of course, that house file, the quality of it and the size of it is absolutely essential for two things. One is to generate volunteer activity. You need to be able to email large groups of people and ask them to show up at your rallies, go door to door and make phone calls, but also in which what many of our clients are interested in. So you can ask them for money. And digital fundraising is significantly about scale. It's about being able to communicate with large numbers of people and get small dollar gifts from that. And in order to succeed, you got to have a large list to work with. So house files is very important, and the size of it is important as you intend to raise more money and get more volunteers to take actions.
You mentioned scale. How does small dollar fundraising scale across different campaign sizes? Like, is it the same for a legislative candidate as it is for a U.S. Senate candidate, or how does that work exactly?
Well, first, I think when we address a new type of client, the first question I got to ask myself is, what is the size of the audience that cares about this office? So if you're running for city council in Greenwood, Indiana, and there's 30,000 residents, that's your audience of people who care, who's on the city council in Greenwood. In fact, it might even be smaller than that, because you've got even a smaller group of people who think that city council is important, and very few will be able to name their city council person. So that list of potential targets to scale up a large number is small. It's much larger when you're running for Congress, and even larger when you're running for governor or U.S. Senate. But there's idiosyncrasies even within that. So perhaps people in Ohio don't really care who the governor of Indiana is, but they might care who the U.S. senator is, because they understand that a vote in the U.S. Senate, whether you're from Indiana or Ohio, has the same weight. So there's a larger group of people interested in who the U.S. senator is from Indiana than who the governor of Indiana is. Then think even more so about the relative profile of the client or candidate. So someone who is particularly inspiring or controversial might have a much larger profile of people who are paying attention to them. So you might have a candidate for Congress like an AOC or a Elise Stefanik, who are much better known nationally, who therefore have a larger audience too. So it's very different based on the size of the race, based on what you're running for, and based on whether or not the candidate is somebody that is really grabbing attention of the media and of grassroots folks all over the country.
So along with the conversation of how important your house file is and nurturing and protecting that, do you have any tips for segmenting a house file?
Yeah, I really think your top 3 segments or individual groups you might create within your house file would be, first, a group based on geography. If you are running for Congress, you might have a list of people who you know for sure live in your congressional district and are on your house file. You might have a list of people you know who live in your home state and are on your house file, and a list of people who are outside your state. And the reason is they care about different things. People outside your state are engaging probably because they see the importance of winning in your congressional district, and they're less interested in the idiosyncrasies of your individual congressional campaign, more interested in, for example, will the Republicans take the House? So you would send them different content. And then people from your state, again, might be interested in some state issues or talk about a broader sense, but not as responsive to emails about TV ads that your opponent has launched. And so geography is one area for sure. Second is probably whether people are donors or are not donors. That's an important segment, and you can treat people who've donated in the past different than folks who've never donated. Then the third segment is one that I think a lot of folks don't think much about, but that's the list of people who are active on your file versus people who are not. So we might think of someone as inactive as an email address that we know is good and works. We know it's being delivered, but you haven't opened an email from us in a certain amount of time. Maybe it's a couple of months, maybe it's 6 months. And so we might start to reduce frequency of email to those folks and treat them more like a prospect file for a number of reasons. One is keeping a lot of dead weight on your list, and emailing a segment of folks who don't respond will affect your overall delivery and inbox placement of emails to the other folks who want to hear from you and are really engaging. And so you can improve your quality across the board by cleaning out some dead weight. And secondly, you might try, for some of the folks we might call inactive, increasingly more creative tactics to try to get them to engage once more. So they signed up at one point, maybe they opened an email and then they haven't done one for 6 months. So maybe we send them an email asking if they are abandoning us, to try to get them to click and engage once again. So those are 3 segments I think every campaign should have built in, and make sure they're paying attention to how they're using and communicating with those folks differently.
I'd like to talk a little bit about prospecting with campaigns being very cyclical. What is the right time in the cycle or in the process to be focused on prospecting? Obviously, for U.S. Senate candidate that's on a 6-year cycle, that may be different than a House candidate, but really, what should that look like? What should that be?
Yeah, I think the best saying that wasn't written for prospecting, but really makes sense here, is that scared money don't make money. And so if you are a candidate running for office, you should be prospecting for new supporters from the first day you announce till the day of the election. Be prepared to pay a slightly higher cost to acquire a new donor than they give. So you might acquire a new donor who gives $25, but spend $50 to get them in the door. But those folks will give again and bring profitability to the campaign. Many will give 3, 4, or 5 times to your campaign. But what's important is to acquire them in the first place. And where many candidates go wrong is they're scared money. They're worried about the cost of acquiring those donors. And so they quit before they have any real success. And during the campaign, your acquisition cost for donors is going to go up and down based on what's happening in the election cycle. Is it summertime and everybody's outside as opposed to sitting indoors reading their emails? Is something happening in the public that's driving people to want to give or to give less? So it's going to go up and down. So you have to be bold, consistently prospect, be aware that you're going to lose money on new acquisitions of donors, and you might lose money for a long time before you start seeing those numbers turn around. So scared money don't make money. That's the saying for today.
And what about the candidates who win, or the incumbents? What should they be doing after Election Day? You mentioned kind of announcement to Election Day, but what about in between?
Well, that's when you can use the advantage of incumbency and the additional media attention that you're going to get to grow your lists even further. Those investments after your victory will pay off. People may not want to give as much just 60, 90 days after your victory, but they will sign up. They'll join your list. They want to hear from you. And those investments you make in growing your file will pay off as you run for reelection. So I would always be prospecting, always adding new names. Even a candidate who did really well raising money in the 2020 cycle needs to understand that a number of their donors are going to stop giving. Maybe they just stop being givers in general. Maybe they retire, have less money. Maybe they change their email address and now we don't know how to get them. So you always need to be bringing in new people, even if you've been successful in the past, because those same people are going to reduce over time their giving.
So now that we've kind of established what a house file is and the importance of growing it, how should candidates budget for building that house file? Is there just a general rule of thumb?
Well, I wish there was an easy rule of thumb, and some of the things I've talked about already play into that. So I find that our costs for acquiring new donors for most of our clients vary dramatically, even within short time frames. They might run a prospecting campaign that actually nets money for a little while, which is a no-brainer. When that's happening, rule number 1, spend more money. So if you're prospecting for new donors and you're making money on that, that's a win. So we'll have some that are making money and then a week later the results have dropped by 50%. There are a lot of reasons why that might be the case. And so it's a little hard to have a rule of thumb that's real objective. What I would say are, when you're making money in prospecting, spend more cash. I would say to understand that the cost of acquiring a new donor is probably going to exceed the amount they give in their first gift. So you've got to be willing, when you're prospecting for donors, to lose money. I tell most candidates be willing to lose as much as half of your money, particularly early on, and to be okay with that. The other rule I think is important is to recognize that prospecting spend is not lost money. It's not sunk cost. It's actually still communicating your message to voters. So when you're running an advertising campaign saying, please join my email list, give to my campaign, you're still getting your name and your issue positions in front of voters. So it's not money lost. It still has a distinct advantage to the candidate to be doing these kinds of activities. So that's another rule I pay attention to. And then you should see over time, as you add more names, to see your fundraising improve. The final rule I would say is it will improve dramatically in the last 60 to 90 days of your campaign. It'll work a lot like a hockey stick. Maybe it grows slowly and then all of a sudden a rapid curve. So that often happens too with candidates. They put a good solid year into fundraising, they see it growing slowly, and then they quit just before the results start coming in. And the reason you'll see that hockey stick is because your donors start sensing a greater sense of urgency. They know that they have to give now or not at all. And so recognizing that the lion's share of the benefit of your fundraising is going to show up in the last 90 days is absolutely important. Have many of our clients raise 80% of their online money in the last 90 days. So you've got to be prepared for that, be patient, know it's coming. So although I wish there was a real easy rule, like spend $2 on every lead, but it's not. So you just have to understand the principles, be patient, and keep determined to build your file.
I think in campaigns, we have a tendency to have a very linear approach to how we look at donors and campaigns. In the business world, you think about customer lifetime value, not just like the first sale, but the number of sales and the volume overall that we can get from a customer. Do you have any sense of, maybe not a specific customer lifetime value, but how often can we expect someone to donate to a campaign if we bring them in through a prospecting or advocacy area? Is that something you have a sense of?
Yeah, it's a little different based on how you bring them in. You can bring in new prospects, new donors through online advertising. Facebook and Google are two very common platforms to do. I find that those folks repeat giving less, but folks who come in via an email campaign, they received a prospecting email from us and gave the first time, generally will give more, and they will give more than twice on average. But the best donors that we have found for our clients recently are folks who give the first time via text message and then join our house testing file. We had for Elise Stefanik, a number of her folks who gave via text give 4 or 5 times. And that's just an incredible number. And that drives up our lifetime value significantly. And that's just within one 12-month period. And they could be on her list for the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a little different based on how you get those customers. I consider a new text donor the most valuable. Next valuable is an email donor. Third most valuable is somebody who comes in with Facebook or Google. I would add the fourth least valuable are people who see a candidate on the news or on Fox, or maybe they're on Sean Hannity and they get excited about them. They Google them, give them money. A lot of those folks never come back. It was a flash in the pan. You did something really exciting, but they don't really know much about the candidate. There's no real long-term relationship there. So those folks can get you excited. Sometimes you do something real exciting as a candidate, get a bunch of quick donations and think I've arrived. and then you'll see some of your overall metrics drop down back down to earth. And I think it's generally because those kind of flash in the pan donors are the least dependable recurring contributors of any.
So for those flash in the pan donors, should the prospecting goal be for an immediate contribution as opposed to warming them up over time?
Well, I love it when we can ask to get married even before we date. I'm going to send you a prospecting email. Please give me money. And that's still solid because if you're getting a prospecting email and you're giving quickly, we've really hit a home run there. Many clients will do more of a slow burn campaign, which I think is appropriate, particularly for folks who are not as high profile. And that's where you just ask people to join your email list as a first step. I joke it's dating before we get married. And so we're going to ask to go out. Please join my email list. I'm going to send you a few emails and hopefully you'll want to get married. Give me some money. That is really effective as a tactic for folks who just aren't universally known. And so they know they're going to need to educate their donors over time. And so it's something that everyone should do, but particularly folks who aren't running for big offices or aren't as well known, is get people on your email list and then ask them for money from there.
Kurt, I don't know if as a kid you used to read comic books or not, but I'm always curious what people's origin story in politics is. Do you have an origin story you can share with us?
I had a history teacher in high school who caught that I was very interested in history and political movements. I was an avid reader, and he was a big Republican, and he recommended that I check out Rush Limbaugh's TV show. At the time, Rush had a 12:30 a.m. or 11:30 p.m. late night show, not sure on which station. But I do know it was too late for me to watch it. My parents would have never let me stay up to watch something like that. So this is way before Caroline remembers, but we used to have these called VHS tapes. And so I would VHS time record the Rush Limbaugh on when he was live and then get up at 5 a.m. so I could watch it before I went to school, and I used to practice basketball early. And so I became real fascinated in the 1993, 1994 timeframe, which of course was the first election in 40 years that Republicans had set themselves up to take both the House and the Senate. And so it was a big wave at the same time I was getting interested, so it had me hooked. I still at the time intended to go to college, not for political science, but for history. I wanted to be a history teacher. I also toyed around with the idea of going into the ministry, abandoned both of those ideas, finished with a political science degree, and the rest is history. But that's how I got involved. I was a big Rush Limbaugh junkie. Stopped listening to him probably in college and never really kept up the habit, but he really got me interested and made it all seem real to me. And I've been working on campaigns ever since.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.